Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to helping business owners to prepare for exit so you can maximize value and exit on your own terms. This is the Exit Insights podcast presented by Succession Plus. I'm Daryl Bates Brownsword, and today I'm talking to Jamie Brownlee from Green Target. Green Target is a specialist PR firm, and I thought, look, we haven't spoken about PR and preparing your business and presenting your business, commercially and on the front foot when you're getting ready for exit. So it was something I hadn't thought about before, and so I approached Jamie and we had a conversation to prepare. So, hey, welcome, Jamie. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me on, Daryl.
That's great. So, Jamie, give us a little bit about your background, because when we spoke, you told me that you're already doing a lot of work in helping business owners prepare their business from a communication and presentation perspective well in advance of them thinking about exit, but with an exit in mind. How does a PR fall into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been doing this now for now on 14 years, and I've seen both sides. So I've seen from the private capital side, and I've seen it from the portfolio and the individual companies that are looking to exit or looking to be acquired. So I can see both sides of it. I think, from a communications perspective, we find it imperative that from the beginning of the relationship with the client, that we know their goals. So what are their plans? Because if we know that, most of them will have sort of a 5-year plan in terms of what they're looking for, where they think the business will be. Are they looking, what kind of exit are they looking for? What kind of potentially acquisition are they looking for? From a PE perspective, what kind of firms are they looking at? What kind of areas they think are going to grow particularly well in the next 5 years? So we implement that as part of any strategy. Now, I see it as being incredibly important that firms that have the ambition to be bought have or raise their credibility bar, so that they are seen in positive light, that they have good quality PR, they have good high-end tier 1 coverage of the brand, so that people will associate a level of credibility with them, which I think does help negotiations. It does help elevate the brand into conversations that maybe that another brand doesn't have that visibility, doesn't have that level of visibility. So I think it's really, really important. I think a lot of firms don't necessarily sort of keep it high up on the agenda, when actually I think it should be, because in this day and age, credibility is everything.
Absolutely. And let's get it straight off the bat. I think one of the big questions that business owners will be thinking if they're hearing about PR in advance of exit, that the fear may be there that, oh my God, is he suggesting that we should be promoting and communicating to the world that we're actually thinking about exiting? Or is he thinking about, hey, because that would terrify my staff? Or is he saying, hey, look, it's just part of your overall brand building strategy. And if you just create general awareness of your business out there and raise the profile of your business, then more people will be aware of your business, including acquirers, and just that exposure and that reputation build and awareness of your business is going to be attractive to any acquirer.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I think there are two different strands. I think you've got some businesses that will want to be very transparent and very explicit about their plans. They may be a smaller business that will have, some of the individual members of the firm or the employees will have a potential stake. That the future of that firm will have an important will be an important part of them in 5 years. So actually communicating that is the plan, I think it acts as an incredible motivational tool. But you're right, there are firms who perhaps don't want that communicated. They want to keep their business objectives close to their chest. I don't believe that actually has any impact on a PR strategy, because the PR strategy should inherently try to raise the profile of the brand, so that as you mentioned earlier, so that firms do know this, do know the brand, do know what it stands for, and understand the type of messaging, understand what their sort of raison d'etre is. And I think that's very, very important. So we deal with both sides. We have firms who are very coy about their plans. They would mention it to us, perhaps wouldn't want that mentioned with media or externally, but that still helps us position them correctly with media. It helps us to determine the type of opportunities that we should be sourcing, and it helps us determine the type of readers that we should be targeting over the sort of the short and long term. But I think for those firms that are potentially more willing to be explicit about their plans, that from a media perspective is very, very strong, because the media can then really start to hone in on the type of angle that they're looking for in their article. They can have a real feel of the firm. And I think one thing that journalists absolutely love, as I'm sure everyone will understand, is they like a firm that they feel are being completely open with them, that they can really relate with them, that there are people behind the brand. So there's always that tightrope of how corporate, how human do I want to be, and it's an interesting change in the way that some firms need to approach.
Okay, so yeah, one of the things that we understand is that brand is one of the most valuable intangible assets that a business has. And the question I've got that I'd love to tap into your expertise and knowledge is at what point does a business start building, let's call it brand value? At what point does that brand actually become an intangible asset for the business? And at what point is it just a cute logo? A lot of SME businesses, they'll get some design done and they'll create a brand for the business, but they don't have brand value yet. The owners, the people in the business love the brand, and some people might not like me saying this, but at some point we move to the point where the brand gets recognized in the marketplace and people start coming to the business. They come to the brand because they know the brand of the business and the product associated with that brand beyond the people. Have you got any feel, Jamie, for what sort of size of business it is? I guess it's different in different industries, but you get that inflection point, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. And I think, ironically, the PR, or I guess the wider marketing sector, often has its own poor PR problem. It does have. There are some strategies. There are some firms. There are some people out there that perhaps, they probably negatively portray the industry as quite fluffy, maybe hard to quantify, intangible, as you mentioned, or the results, should I say, are intangible. So it can be difficult, as you say, and we do sometimes feel that pushback. But I think from a credibility side, and I think size or appearance of the firm, and we see this a lot because we will be working with a range of different size firms. And one thing I would say about the media, that they are one massive positive about the media and journalists in particular, they don't often necessarily always go to the big boys for comment, for insight, for thought leadership. They're very, very willing to listen to a range of different sizes, and that's definitely something that they have been tasked with, individual journalists, making sure that they are getting comments and they're sourcing data and information from as diverse a pool as possible. So that gives everybody it's a much more even ground. And when I'm talking about media, I'm talking about the big hitting, the Sunday Times, the Times, the Telegraph, the FT, you name the big publications, the big broadsheets that have are still accessible via newspapers. And I think that gives everyone a really great chance. So this idea of how a firm can appear. So if it comes to the negotiation table, it comes to the point of exit. Yes, the numbers, and yes, you'll get a lot of the information from your P&L. But actually, as you say, that intangible, that feeling of how big this firm is and what it stands for, that has been carefully crafted, or that can be carefully crafted through effective communications and PR over time, so that regardless of what the numbers might say, you might have a feeling of what that firm. And I think that we perhaps don't give that enough attention of what that value can be, and that actually can provide quite a bit of a buffer and an extra premium on top of a potential price. So I think that's something that people perhaps don't really recognize, but it's definitely there. It's definitely there.
Yeah. So that's the perception, if I'm understanding correctly. I like to really simplify things down. So
Sure.
So that's, if I'm understanding, Jamie, is a business that's punching above its weight. It appears to be much bigger than it really is through exposure and general awareness of its brand name, and that translates to real valuation when the business exits because of perceived value and size, even though the financials may not portray that. So we can do that deliberately. So the next thing that comes to mind is, I imagine that there's a lot of business owners listening to this podcast and they're going, I've never engaged someone from PR before. Like, we're just too small, or we've never had to. We've had other marketing channels. Isn't PR old school? Getting in the media is almost irrelevant nowadays because we've all got our own media channel. We're all on social media, for example, and we can do that. So, can you give us some examples of what the sort of things you would actually do and achieve for an organization by engaging and working with someone to consciously develop their PR strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned social media, which I think I'll jump in first on, because social media for the large majority of firms cannot be done without effective PR. And what I mean by that is the coverage that you're generating through your PR your PR program is generating the ammo necessary for your social media channels. So it's providing that third-party accreditation via the media that will help you to engage with your clients and prospective clients. So it's absolutely fundamental. Firms that want to jump into social media without having a good PR program in place, they will run out of information, I think, quite quickly. And we see that quite a lot. So to keep the momentum, to keep the content, to keep that almost that liquid feel of an account, of a social media account, it's really important to have coverage and to be generating really good news that's coming out of your content. So that's really important. I think in general, the way we try and structure a program for clients is it's looking at the things that what is your growth plan? It goes back to those kind of milestones. So where are you doing things positively? Where are you recruiting? Where are you partnering? What products are you producing? What services are you producing, etc. So it's really blowing your own trumpet. And I think in the UK we often have a bit of a problem with this, but we're getting better. But I think it's really important for companies to do that. And I think that journalists really like that because it allows them to create a timeline over the years of where they're going. It provides a bit of context. And that's very. The other thing as well is using your existing content. So what are you doing on the marketing front? What are you using for your clients that can be repurposed for media, which can then communicate to a different range of prospective clients as well? So you're just making sure that you're ticking all the boxes in terms of your content and where it's being used. One of the big areas that we have seen massive growth over the last few years, and an area that works particularly well for smaller firms is what we like to call newsjacking, and that's finding interesting pieces of news, finding interesting pieces of data, different interesting developments in your industry, and jumping on them with short comments, jumping on them quickly and effectively, often using a PR firm like ours, or you can do it yourself, but you really rely on good relationships with media, which obviously a PR firm will provide, and jumping onto these stories, because invariably a lot of these stories, and when this data comes out, journalists are doing exactly what a lot of these individual businesses are doing. They're having to write about it, and the one thing they want is comment. They want comment as quickly as possible. So we do that very, very effectively with smaller firms who maybe don't have as much of their own news. So you're manufacturing news and interesting news hooks for your client. What that does over time is it makes the firm, it allows the firm to join the dialogue with the bigger firms. So and you can see this by simply typing in the client's name over time, and you'll see on Google, from a search engine optimization, that firm is appearing higher and higher up. And the level of or the type of coverage it's receiving is increasing that credit or raising that credibility bar. So it's a really effective way of joining a dialogue without having to say too much about yourself. So you don't have to necessarily come at it from a point of saying this is where we are, which can, as you know, as can happen, it can diminish your chances because your AUM might be a lot lower than the rest of the industry. You might be one of the smaller players. So it allows you to join a conversation. So that's a really integral part of any program that we will always suggest. And then alongside that, you've got you mentioned it earlier, your classic, your kind of the classical PR tactics of making sure you meet the right media, making sure you're on features, making sure how are you with regards to awards? Are there any awards you should be entering? Are there any conferences you should be attending? So it's a really well balanced program of a mixture of owning your own news attacking the so owning your own news and your own stories and your own growth, targeting external pieces of news where you can fit yourself into the dialogue, and then it's your tactical side of features, awards, conferences. So it's a nicely rounded campaign that we set as a blueprint, and invariably we often see clients that really do grow at a pace I'm not even sure, or from a media perspective, that I'm not sure. I always think that clients are very surprised by the pace that it happens, but because we just know it works. And I think, as I say, one of the great things is the small firms are allowed to do this, that journalists are not just going to the classic firms, the classic big firms as they did before. They are very much more open to suggestions from a variety of different size firms.
So you touched on a few things there, Jamie. So I think we said, look, one of the things we need to be doing is, hey, look, and I'm not sure you said this, but media outlets, I guess, are looking for news, aren't they?
Yes.
And they're looking for in the commercial areas, they're looking for good news stories. So they're always looking for reliable sources to tap into.
And bad news stories as well, I must say.
Sure, yeah.
Unfortunately.
A bit of controversy.
Yeah.
And you said one of the things you can do is newsjacking, which I quite liked. I thought, hang on, he's onto something here, a bit of disruption, and piggyback on other people's stories, where you provide commentary, industry insight, and that helps you become a voice or a spokesperson for the industry. If you become a known spokesperson, you become, they'll come to you again and again and again and go, what's her insight on this story? What's their perspective on this? And they're always looking for someone who can, isn't camera shy and can share a story and think on their feet and come up with a response. So if you can do that, that's really helpful. That would then help you become, I think, my colleague Daniel Priestley would call a key person of influence. So you become the spokesperson, the voice of the industry, the go-to person because you're knowledgeable on all things for the industry, which is just going to raise your profile and awareness and get you referenced more, and therefore appear on SEO. Have I captured the gist of it there?
Yeah, absolutely. That you really have, and I think it's really important. The newsjacking is a fantastic tool, and I think when we say piggybacking on the back of other announcements, it's not companies. This is governmental. This is
right.
For example, economic data, association or trade body information on the sector. It's independent data and announcements, so that you are not necessarily jumping on the bandwagon and raising the profile of a potential competitor. It's independent organizations and association data. And as you can imagine, everyone's looking at that. Journalists are looking at that. Hence why it's a great way of doing it. The other thing as well, which the reason why this works so well for smaller firms, is because they don't necessarily have the levels of red tape that a bigger firm will have. We often find, I've worked with much bigger firms, this strategy is quite difficult for them, because they have obviously layers of approval. There's regulation. There's a lot of processes that need to go through. A lot of hoops that need to be jumped through to get that piece out, make it external. So you actually end up losing the opportunity, because one thing I've learned in the last few years, and compared to when I started 14 years ago, the pace of the media is frightening. And the news agenda now it used to be, you'd think about a day of what will happen on the news agenda. We're talking hours now. I mean, the news agenda is changing by the hour. So the speed at which a nimbler firm can do this and do this very effectively, and that's why journalists like them, because they know they'll get something quickly.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so thanks for highlighting that. And I guess extending that further, what you could do is not create, but extract your own statistics and comment on them and provide them. So I'm just thinking about industry statistics that aren't necessarily announced, but you can go, well, this is, let's share this because something needs to be done about that.
And I totally agree. And I think another point on research, I would say, in data, and this is something that I do not see firms doing anywhere near enough of. it used to be years ago that if you did some research, if you researched your client base, sorry, if you researched a base of clients like your own, or a base of investors, let's say, like your own, you would pay thousands of pounds, and it would have to be an external research company. Now that still has a place. They're still important. It's still, it's great to do that. But gone are the days where journalists need that. Journalists are very, very happy now to work with a story of, say, 100 of your clients. So we encourage our clients, and I would encourage businesses more and more to do this. Poll your clients. Ask your clients what their views are. You can offer a prize draw, you can offer whatever it needs to be, vouchers to get the numbers. But if you can poll your own clients and ask them their views on the sector, gauge their sentiment. So what are they thinking of the next quarter? What are they thinking in H2? What do they think that the sectors, what are their challenges? That is a story. So that's a story for a journalist. And the great thing is you then develop a press release, goes to media. The journalists love that because they absolutely love data. Data is what you essentially can create a story around. So data is essentially the bones, and then the meat can be the spokesperson or the commentary. So I would really encourage businesses and your listeners, think about your clients and your client base and your database of are you doing a newsletter? Well, great. Can you add a link that has a few questions in there that you can then create your own news hook? So as to your point about owning your data, that is such an effective way of doing it. And I think people often think, oh, well, I've only got 1,000 clients on this and I only get about 200 responding. That's absolutely fine. That's a great number. So you don't need thousands of respondents. You don't need a database of thousands of people now.
Interesting. So Jamie, that really is an insight, actually. So thanks for that. Like we can really, narrow the data down, and if you've got data, you turn it into statistic, which becomes information, which becomes a story, and a story is based on data, even if it's a small sample size. What about the differences between B2C businesses and B2B businesses? Is there a difference in how we approach things there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's obviously, absolutely, there is a B2B excuse me, a B2B firm will have the type of coverage and the type of, I guess, available media outlets there are is smaller. B2C firms will be able to come up with stories that maybe resonate a bit more with the readers. So you'll often have a much bigger pool of potential media opportunities. B2B trades, for example, are inherently obviously a lot. The pool of B2B trades that there are is obviously a lot smaller. But I think in terms of effective PR, I think what you'll find with B2B is it's a lot heavier on the messaging, a lot heavier on the strategy, and a lot heavier on what exactly you are saying and what exactly you're communicating, because it's inherently you are talking to other businesses. I think from a B2C, it's obviously there's a lot more creativity there. So a lot more creativity on your angles, your stories. Data comes into it a lot more. I don't think B2B firms use data anywhere near as well as they should from a PR perspective as B2C. But that, to be honest, that's probably a little bit obvious because they don't have a sort of a client base of consumers who could be polled. But so there are differences for sure, and I would say that there's a creativity difference at times, and that's not because B2B firms are not creative. It's just that it's a lot more heavier on the kind of the corporate announcements, the messaging, the strategy than maybe B2C firms have.
Okay. So look, you've shared a lot of fantastic ideas there, Jamie. So I'm just thinking we've got an SME business owner out there. They might be a bit small. They might be thinking they're not ready to engage and get a PR agency. If they needed to do something themselves, just one thing that you think they should focus on to get started, to start to raise the awareness of their brand, what would you suggest they do?
I would absolutely say that the most important thing is to have a look at your business. So really just have a think about what your business could provide in terms of data, content, spokespeople that could work well externally. If you think that you have one of those three, two of those three, or all three, fantastic, then that is a great opportunity. It shouldn't be wasted. I think don't be afraid of PR costs being astronomical, because they simply aren't. There are firms out there that will do this for a very effective price. They will also do it for a trial perspective as well, so you can get a feel, because that's really important. At the same time, if you feel confident that you could do it yourself, you can absolutely do that. It doesn't necessarily take a huge amount of effort to produce good quality content, or to communicate the type of content or data that you already have, because invariably you're probably already doing it with your marketing, via your marketing to your existing clients. So it's just making sure that you are utilizing every single piece that you have, and do not be afraid of the media. The media are there to help you, and I think if you can provide a human element to your corporate story, you'll go a long way, and raise that credibility bar, which is absolutely essential.
Yeah, we love a good story. We love a good feel good story about, and with the human angle, don't we? So if we can bring the human angle in there, the chances are the media will be all over it.
Yeah, and look, the old. I think, if we had this conversation maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we'd probably be talking. Yeah, but what about the negativity of the press? Aren't the press so negative? And yes, of course, a negative story always sells better than a positive story. However, we have certainly seen a shift since COVID towards the business sector of media being far more receptive to good stories, far more, I would say, open to good stories and good growth stories, because I think we all needed it. I think the media really did respond to COVID and how tough that was for a lot of businesses. So good news stories are easier to sell in than they were in previous years.
Okay, well, that's interesting and great to know. And from a personal factor, I like the fact that we're starting to think a bit more about positive and good news stories.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Jamie, look, I'm just thinking this through. We've got so many angles and areas that someone could focus on. We acknowledge that our brand is an intangible asset, and it can be a significant value asset when it comes to exiting our business. And even though it doesn't appear on the balance sheet, it is there. And if strategically worked, can create significant asset value even for a smaller business. We've gone, it doesn't happen by chance. We need to get on the front foot in getting the messaging out and getting clever with the stories that we pull together and pitch and present to media outlets if we want them to reshare the story for us. We want to grab data and information that's out there that's publicly shared and provide opinion on this, because that creates a good angle. We've got to continue with our own social media and have a content plan around that. We could use some help with that so that we don't run out of ideas, so that we get a pattern and a theme going. You've covered a whole lot, but business owners, we've already got a lot on our plate. We've got a number of things we're going through. We've got there's always so much we've got to work on as a business owner. If you were to suggest that there's one key message that you want business owners to take away from our conversation today, one nugget of advice, what would you want them to take away?
I think everything you've just said there is absolutely on the money and exactly condensed really nicely. One thing I would say, don't leave it too late. Don't leave it too late, because what you don't want to happen is you say you're on a 5-year journey and you go, oh, we don't need PR, or we can't afford PR. And year 5 comes along and you think, right, okay, we're in a good position. We think we're ready for that 5-year. We're on target. We're ready for to be purchased now, and we're looking for a buyer. At that point, you're already too late if you're starting PR, because you haven't created the dialogue, you haven't laid the groundwork, you don't know the journalists, you haven't communicated what you do particularly well, you probably haven't owned a section of the media via good data, and you probably haven't inserted your brand into dialogues with bigger brands, so that when it comes to a negotiation table, you might get some interested buyers that think you appear bigger than you are, and that point we made earlier. So I think one thing I would say is, if you think there is an element, if you think that you have a 5-year plan and you think you can get there, get your PR and get your communications sorted early. Start to lay the groundwork early, because PR is not something you can click your fingers and it happens. It's something that does take a lot of groundwork, a lot of laying the foundations, so that you have the credibility. You've laid the foundations so that you have the credibility to talk to media, and then media will take you seriously. It's the classic old phrase of PR. Talk to, if you can talk to the media or talk about the market will talk about you, and that's what we fundamentally believe. But that does not happen overnight. So do not leave it too late, which is what I would say.
Don't leave it too late. Thanks, Jamie. There's some great insights there for business owners to take away to help build the value of their business. It's not going to happen overnight, but get started early, and don't leave it too late. Thanks for your time today.
No worries. Thank you very much.